Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, the Easter holidays are over, but my goodness me, this Russia story is not going away. Let's just take our minds back to the 14th of March. Jeremy Corbyn in the House of Commons asking some quite searching questions of the Prime Minister in the Salisbury poisoning to Russia.
Has the Prime Minister taken the necessary steps under the Chemical Weapons Convention to make a formal request for evidence from the Russian government under Article 9.2? How has she responded to the Russian government's request for a sample of the agent used in the Salisbury attack to run its own tests? Has high-resolution trace analysis been run on a sample of the nerve agent, and has that revealed any evidence as to the location of its production or the identity of its perpetrators? And can the Prime Minister update the House on what conversations, if any, she has had with the Russian government? And while suspending planned high-level contacts, does the Prime Minister agree that it is essential to maintain a robust dialogue with Russia?
Well, boy, did Corbyn take some stick for saying that at a time when the Prime Minister appeared to be strong, saying it's definitely Russia what done it. And that's before, of course, she got international support from America and about half of the European Union. Indeed, the next day, the Daily Mail headline, Corbyn, the Kremlin stooge. The Telegraph, Corbyn accused of being an apologist for the Kremlin, as his own MPs turn on him, and the Independent, furious MPs condemn Corbyn's response to the Salisbury. So, Corbyn was asking questions, but many said he'd reverted to his old pro-Russian type. Well, today, Gary Aitkenhead, the chief executive of the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory at Porton Down, told Sky News he had not been able to prove that the Novichok involved, the nerve agent, was made in Russia. Here he is.
We, in terms of our role, were able to identify it as Novichok, to identify that it was a military-grade nerve agent. We have not verified the precise source, but we provided the scientific information to the government, who have then used a number of other sources to piece together the conclusions that they've come to.
But you have not been able to establish at Porton Down that this was made in Russia?
As I said, it's our job to provide, the scientific evidence that identifies what the particular nerve agent is. We identified that it was from this family and that it's a military-grade nerve agent, but it's not our job to then say where that actually was manufactured.
Is it possible to establish where these things are manufactured?
It can be established through a number of different input sources which the government has access to. From our perspective, scientific evidence is only one of those sources, and it requires a number of other things in order to verify that.
So to be clear, you're not able at Porton Down where it is from?
At this stage, with the work that we've done thus far, we've been able to establish that it's Novichok or from that family. We are continuing to work to help to provide additional information that might help us get closer to, the question that you asked, but we haven't yet been able to do that.
OK, so no conclusive proof. And what, you may ask, is going on with the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW? If you remember, they went down a week after the attack, and we're waiting for their conclusions. They meet tomorrow in The Hague, and within the last hour, the Foreign Office have said that the government has been clear from the very beginning that the substance used in Salisbury to poison former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia was Novichok. And it is their assessment Russia was responsible for the attack. And that's the key word, folks, assessment. Is there actually any proof? And if there was intelligence, MI5, MI6 intelligence, that we're not allowed to know about, why would the Foreign Office, in the statement, still use this word, assessment? Proof is very hard to come by. And breaking news in the last few minutes, President Vladimir Putin of Russia has said he wants a thorough inquiry into the ex-spy's poisoning in Britain. So, folks, does all of this, does the statement we've had today from the chief executive at Porton Down, Gary Aitkenhead, does the lack of anything so far from the OPCW, does this vindicate Jeremy Corbyn for being cautious in pointing the finger at Russia? And if you think yes, actually, Corbyn was right to be sceptical, call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think no, it doesn't prove a thing, in which case text to 84850, or tell me what piece of evidence you would like to see in order to be convinced. And you can do that by tweeting using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can Facebook. I'm live here from sunny Colorado on the 3rd of April, which just happens to be my birthday as well. There we are. Let's go straight to Vincent in Bedford. Vincent, do you think this lack of evidence is to some extent vindicating the questions Corbyn asked in the House of Commons back on March 14th?
Well, I think it does, yeah, because accusing Russia is not something to be taken lightly, I think what surprised me is she showed a lot of nerve, Mrs May, that in accusing Russia, and even managed to convince all the others to join in. But when it comes to negotiating in Europe against the European Union, she often comes across as weak and just gives in to everything. And then it was a surprise that she came out the way she did without there being 100%, anyone being 100% certain that it was the Russian government authorised it. Because that's what they're saying, that the Russian government authorised it.
I mean, Vincent, she did point the finger, but I tell you what, Boris went further, Vincent.
Yes.
Boris Johnson said on March the 18th, I'll quote Boris, he said, "We actually have evidence within the last 10 years that Russia have not only been investigating the delivery of nerve agents for the purpose of assassination, but has also been creating and stockpiling Novichok." So Boris said it's an absolute slam dunk. And yet today, when the Foreign Office puts this statement out within the last hour, they say it is their assessment that Russia was responsible for the attack. So what I'd like to see, Vincent, I want to know what Boris has got to say. But looking at his Twitter feed and everything else, he appears...
If he has evidence, he should have told everyone else.
Do you think Boris might have jumped the gun on this?
Well, yeah, and I heard someone from Russia saying that it could lead to a real war. If the bad feeling between Russia and the UK and everybody, it could lead, to some kind of conflict.
Well, I don't think we're at that point yet, Vincent, but there's certainly a new Cold War, and you've got Russian jets menacing UK airspace, and you've got the Russian Navy going down the channel. So we're not in a good place. But, Vincent, you feel to some extent this lack of evidence that's been produced does vindicate the questions that Corbyn asked, yeah?
Well, I think it must do, yes. At this stage, anyway.
Yep, OK. No, Vincent, thank you. As much as I don't like Jeremy Corbyn, he was absolutely right. This is Great Britain, the land of justice, the land of caution and intellect. Theresa May and Boris Johnson have just thrown that out of the window, says Peter by text. Hi, Nigel. Theresa May and Boris look complete idiots today, says Tony on Facebook. Andrew says, the country of manufacture of this nerve agent is not as important as the fact that it was used in a terrorist attack. I am more concerned that a British police officer was seriously injured. Yeah, and actually, dozens of other people turning up at the local hospital in Salisbury in a state of great anguish. David is calling from Fareham. Good evening, David.
Hi, sorry, Nigel, it's Farnham. But happy birthday, by the way.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you very much.
Now, I've actually got one of these UK petitions, which you're probably fully aware of. We need 100,000 signatures for Parliament to debate it. And for Theresa May to open up, presumably dialogue going on anyway, but to invite Putin over or at least have a discussion in person with him somewhere to actually, put their point of view. I'm not a Corbyn supporter, but he's got a point, and the questions he asked, presumably he was given advice anyway, are very relevant. I can only think that they must have had other sort of intelligence going on, which I believe they share with the other European countries to get so much support. But there are two sides.
Well, David, if that's the case, if that's fine, if that's the case, and sure, there are things that we can't always be told, I understand that. But why then, as I say, within the last hour or so, did the Foreign Office put out this statement saying it is their assessment Russia... Surely if they had intelligence, they'd use a stronger word than assessment, wouldn't they?
You might well be right, but I think what they haven't said, as far as I know, is this stuff manufactured anywhere else but Russia? Because from Russia's part, obviously they're denying it, but they haven't sort of come up with a credible explanation themselves as to did it get in the wrong hands when the Soviet Union was breaking up. So
there was certainly the former correspondent for the Irish Times made the point that in 1993 all sorts of things disappeared. Also, David, it is true that Porton Down itself had a small stock of Novichok, otherwise it couldn't possibly have had the antidote.
I wasn't aware of that, but
yes.
To me, it raises another point, is what sort of deterrent is Trident when Russia's quite willing to sort of, if it is Russia, to push this thing. At the end of the day, if it is Russia, they're obviously not too worried about our nuclear deterrent, as were the Argentinians weren't either when they invaded the Falklands, knowing full well we had a nuclear-equipped navy.
But more questions, David, to be asked, yeah?
Yeah, but in terms of my 100,000 signatures, do you know how many I've got so far? 6.
No, I don't.
So I need a few more.
Oh, well, there we go. Hey-ho. David, I thank you very much for your call. Andrew says on Facebook, so Jeremy Corbyn, the statesman, was right to call for evidence and caution right again. Prime Minister waiting. And for those of you who think that on tonight's show I'm coming out in full-throated support for Jeremy Corbyn, in a moment I will tell you about the meeting he attended last night and what I think of it. But for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. Well, Gary Aikenhead, the chief executive of Porton Down, said this today.
We have not verified the precise source.
All of which asks, was Jeremy Corbyn right in the House of Commons to ask questions back on the 14th of March before pointing the finger at Russia? And of course he was damned for it. But in many ways he was damned not just because of what he said, but because they thought he'd reverted to type. They thought Corbyn was actually very good at supporting people who are generally enemies of this country. And Corbyn was very good at linking up with extremists. And of course, since then, we've had the big anti-Semitism row within the Labour Party, none of which would have been helped by his activities last night. So he attended a meeting in Islington held by a group called Judas. And they're a Jewish group, but boy, are they... they were shouting out things like bleep, 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 capitalism, booing the names of mainstream Jews whose names were read out. They're calling for the overthrow of the state, and they loathe Israel to the extent that they want it properly disposed of. Now, Jeremy turned up last night, and he brought some presents with him. He bought some beetroots that he'd grown on his allotment. Isn't that nice? Isn't that sweet? They sound like a really extreme group. A massive embarrassment, I think, to the Labour Party, particularly given the rows over anti-Semitism. And a spokesman for the Labour Party has said that Jeremy Corbyn attended in a personal capacity, not in his role as Labour leader. Let me tell you, when you lead a big political party, nothing you do is in a personal capacity. It is all there in full public view, and it's yet another example of Jeremy Corbyn keeping some pretty dodgy company. So back to the lack of evidence from Porton Down, the fact that the OPCW, the International Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, have yet to report, and we'll hear more tomorrow. We have to ask ourselves the question, was Corbyn right on this at least on the 14th of March to ask questions before we all decided it was Russia what done it? Mrs May seemed pretty convinced. Boris seemed absolutely certain. And yet the Foreign Office response tonight still is that it's their assessment that Russia was responsible for the attack, which indicates to me we haven't really got the full intelligence on this. I hope I'm wrong, but that's how it looks. Daniel is calling from Crowthorne and is a new caller to this show. Good evening, Daniel.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Happy birthday as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I just I find it very bemusing, and I don't think I'll be alone in this. She obviously wants to be seen as very strong, Theresa May. But they're making a big fuss about something which is obviously very serious. But when you put it in the context of things like Brexit, Rotherham, Oxford, and many other things which they could have made a great fuss about, they haven't. When you think about the Ukraine situation, NATO pressing east and east onto the Russian borders, was very threatening towards Russia. That is very...
And Daniel, can I just add, and the European Union as well?
Absolutely, which is why I'm afraid, I voted for Brexit, and I really think you are a true patriot, and I applaud everything that you've done, and you're having a bit of a rest now, and God bless you. As for Corbyn, well, I would never vote Labour now. It doesn't surprise me what he was doing last night. Many Jews, of course, were behind communism and Marxism in the early stages. Marx himself was a Jew, so there's nothing new there. They divide up, obviously, in many ways. I don't want to be seen as anti-Semitic myself. But Corbyn, well, if you're going to strike political points against Corbyn, then by all means do it. I will never vote for the man myself. But I happen
But was he, Daniel, was he right? Was he right to ask some questions before the whole world decided it's Russia what done it?
Absolutely, and the corollary question that I would add to you, which perhaps you don't want to pursue, is where does this lay Theresa May? Because, you see, the thing is that one of your previous announcers on LBC before you came on, and I don't know his name because I'm pretty new to this, he actually said, I can't believe, or I'm paraphrasing, I can't believe that the government would do this. Well, hang on a minute. The government is the government. They're politicians. They have security to uphold, information to keep to themselves. And guess what? We went into Iraq and other places without information. Now, they should have learned from this.
Daniel, it was Ian Dale, who was the presenter before me, and Ian said, he can't believe the government would rush to judgment unless they had some intelligence there. But your point of view, that since Iraq, there has been a complete breakdown, I think, of confidence and trust in our leaders is one, Daniel, that I've heard from many, many people, and I thank you for your call. On Twitter I get, remember the polonium poisoning case? Why should this latest case be any different? And 28 countries didn't expel over 100 Russian diplomats on a fluke. Chris, I do understand what you're saying, but over the last few years, a lot of the West has wanted Russia to be seen to be the enemy. Certainly in Brussels, all of them want that. And if something was said at the European Council or something was said to Donald Trump on the phone that led to 60 diplomats from this country being expelled, why, if that's the case, does the Foreign Office statement this evening still only use the word that it is their assessment that Russia was responsible for the attack? I would have thought if they had the intelligence, they would use a much stronger word. On Twitter, of course it does. Once again, the man has been proved right on these vitally important issues, but watch the right wing and let the government off the hook and attack Corbyn, says Gracie. Tessa is my next caller. She's calling from Woodford, and another new caller. Welcome, Tessa.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, and I'm asking you, do you now think Corbyn was right to ask those questions back on March 14th?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a Corbyn fan. I know a lot of people aren't. But I'm a Corbyn fan. And yeah, I mean, he's taken the right steps of being cautious. I mean, it's quite laughable that we've got a government that's gone out there, thrown these accusations, and made us look like a laughingstock yet again. We've kind of gone in, full blown, and just thrown the accusations towards Russia, and we don't actually have 100% solid evidence. Where's the evidence? Let's prove it. And we've not done that. We've just...
I don't know, Tessa. But somehow, Tessa, Theresa May, for the first time since she became Prime Minister, has emerged looking like a strong leader, has had international support. Has she told them something that she hasn't told us?
I would like to believe that she has, but to be honest with you, I don't think so. I mean, the fact that, it's emerged today that, we don't have the source of where it's come from, unless she's hiding something, but I don't believe she is. And I think, she must have had a big set of balls to actually go ahead and accuse Russia, a few weeks ago and, stand by what she said without the evidence. And, everyone totally slated Corbyn for that. And yet, he's the right person. He's come across and said, let's be cautious. Let's not just go ahead and start accusing without actually having the full evidence. And he was right to do so.
Yeah, no, well, Tessa, I think, there are quite a few people are taking that point of view. I think the problem that he's got with a broad... you're a Corbynista and that's fine. The problem he has, Tessa, with a broader audience is just so many bad associations as people see it, with former leaders of the IRA, Hamas, Hezbollah, let alone this meeting he attended in Islington last night. Isn't that really his Achilles heel?
I kind of think that, he's probably an open-minded man where, and a lot of people say that, he's associated himself with, people that are quite negative, and, he shouldn't be, associating himself with them. However, I think he's quite open-minded. He kind of sees points of view from both angles. He doesn't kind of go in and start judging people without actually, having the evidence to do so. And, he's somebody that kind of, like I said...
do you think, Tessa, we'll ever get the evidence for this, of who actually did this?
To be honest with you, I don't think so. I don't feel that, we have that evidence. And if we did, I think Theresa May would have just, she would have disclosed that. And she hasn't. So, no. And I feel...
We may never find out.
Yeah, and I feel now that we actually look absolutely ridiculous to the rest of the world, especially after today. It's insane. And I think that she needs to apologise.
Well, she's not going to do that in a hurry, Tessa, because if she did that, I think her position would be almost untenable. So it's, high stakes all round. Tessa, I thank you very much indeed. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. Well, Gary Aikenhead, the boss of the Porton Down Laboratory, said today...
We have not verified the precise source.
So we just don't know where this Novichok was made. There is no absolute proof that it was made in Russia and came from Russia. And, in the context of that, I'm asking you today, was perhaps Jeremy Corbyn right back in the 14th of March to ask questions and not to, rush to judgment and point the finger at Russia? But before I go back to your calls on that subject, quite a sobering thought. Last night, there were 2 shootings in the space of an hour in London, including a drive-by attack that's left a 17-year-old girl dead and a boy of 16 critically ill. Friends said the girl, named locally as Tamasha Melbourne, was killed for no reason at all in Tottenham on Monday night. The medics confirmed she died when shots were fired from a vehicle as it drove past a group of young people. And 2 miles away, in Walthamstow, a boy was found with gunshot wounds, with another boy of 15 who had stab injuries. There's been a spike in violent crime in London. We've seen more murders committed in London in February and March than there were in New York. Ex-Met Police Chief Percy Logan, said it is proof that London's violent traits have become a virus. I never thought I'd see the day when the murder rate in London would overtake that of New York. And I wonder whether the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, should spend a bit less time slagging off Donald Trump and a bit more time getting to grips with crime in London, because clearly we have a real bad problem here. My next caller is from Palm Beach in Florida, and he's called Trevor. Hello, Trevor.
Hello, Nigel. Great debate. Nigel, I'll tell you what, let's not be naive here. The Russians have got a whole litany of cases using poisonous substances. I know on its own it's not proof, but look at Litvinenko and the polonium.
Yes.
Look at Lugovoy, the Russian senator who was given a special Medal of Honor for having perpetrated this crime. Putin could have as easily thrown the man out of a window, which is another method, but he didn't. He wanted the trials, like the crumbs in Hansel and Gretel. He wanted the trial to go back to Russia because he wants to warn all other potential spies about the downside of being treasonous, so-called, to Russia. So I think you've just got to, the dots are on the wall, you need to join them up, and they say Putin, and it's underlined, and I think Mr. Corbyn, Lord forbid, we have Mr. Corbyn to protect us against the world, because this man would be worse than Chamberlain.
Well,
you know what he would say, Nigel, with Chamberlain? He'd say, give me proof. I know Hitler's taken over Poland, Czechoslovakia, Holland, France, Belgium, etc., but give me proof that this man really is as aggressive as you make out.
Yes.
I'm not so sure.
Noel Coward's very funny song, Don't Let's Be Beastly, to the Germans. Two things I want to fire back, Trevor, with you. One is, of course, that we've seen a series of gangland killings, mafia-style killings of Russians that have taken place on British soil. And I've said from the start, Trevor, I think this was more than likely a Russian actor that committed this, but it may well be, Trevor, that it wasn't something sanctioned by Putin and the Kremlin, but something that happened in the Russian underworld against a man, and you're quite right, you said it, who is seen as a traitor because he gave away Russian state secrets to us. So, you know, it doesn't have to be Putin that did this. There's lots of bad stuff that has gone on within the UK.
The one person that would feel aggrieved that this man talked is Russia. It's not, this man was not part of necessarily the mafia or the underworld per se, who had debts or whatever it is to the underworld.
But Trevor, he might have betrayed colleagues, mightn't he? He might have betrayed colleagues that he was working with.
And I'll tell you what, again, that would have been part of the KGB's problem to sort out, and they want to establish some discipline. But all I'm saying is, join the dots as to how the Russians have eliminated people, and poison
if I accept,
is a
Trevor,
perfect method. And
if I accept, Trevor,
last point. Yeah, sorry.
No, let me ask you one more question, Trevor. Let me, for the basis of this conversation, accept everything you've said. Right? Why do it now? To somebody who came to the UK way back in 2006, why do it now, just a couple of months ahead of the Football World Cup, a big showcase for Russia? Why not leave it till September? Why do it now, Trevor?
100% right, but Nigel, I think you're forgetting the election, which I know was a preordained event. It was a coronation.
It's a walkover.
But it was. But nevertheless, I think he wanted to have his people behind him. And you know, Putin is a macho man. He loves parading around half naked with his guns, etc., etc. So he wanted to show the world what power he has from a country that's smaller than Italy, with the 10th largest country, with the 5th largest armed forces in the world that they can't afford to sustain. But
so we should back the government. We should back the government on the basis that they've got form on this. Yeah.
I think, Nigel, we should use that lovely adage: if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it is a bloody duck.
Trevor, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Nigel, the Russia Corbyn apologists I've heard on your shows are deluded So many countries have expelled Russian diplomats on the evidence she has, but we clearly can't see all the classified files, says Martin in Dunstable. Martin, I understand that, but I just ask why, if that's the case, the Foreign Office statement, that goes out tonight still says it is their assessment that Russia was responsible. Why not use a stronger word? Annette thinks Jeremy Corbyn was right on this occasion. I don't believe Russia did this. Alliston still thinks the Russian did it, but I don't know how we're ever going to be able to prove it. And that, I think, perhaps is one of the real problems we got. We may never, ever find out the truth of this story. Tina says, why carry out Russian expulsions merely on an assessment? This is dangerous and incompetent if so. Tina, I have to say, I want to hear from Boris. It's his department, the Foreign Office, that have put out this statement this afternoon. They say it's their assessment. Boris goes on television and says he's absolutely got proof. I think we need to hear from Boris pretty quickly. I'm going to go to Ben in Bristol. Ben, good evening.
Well, Nigel, we're back together again.
Hi there. So,
Hey.
What do you make of it all? I'm doing all right.
Nigel,
What do you think?
I don't want to say too much, because the last guy, he was on it, Nigel. I mean, are you just trying to get the ratings up on your show? You seem to have taken leave with your senses. Everybody, 8 out of 10 people in Britain, doing exactly what the last caller said. If a Russian spy gets killed, Nigel, can you help me out here? What nation is number one suspect if there's somebody for spying on the Russians? Can you help me here, Nigel? You don't need to...
This man, Ben, this man was a Russian traitor. He betrayed state secrets. The Russian state, and I've no doubt all the operatives, Ben, that he worked with over the years, would have absolute disgust for this individual. I understand that completely.
He's their
but do you?
John. It's their jihadi John. And they'll be happy that they've got him. When we get jihadi John out in Syria, we celebrate, and rightly so. He deserves to be taken out.
Yes.
We don't use poison. They use more subtle means than us. We just drop a drone, blast a building, and whoever else is there gets killed.
And well, they were certainly very unsubtle means and not very effective means if it was the Russian state that did it. But Ben, is it not possible? Well, he's still alive, isn't he?
He's not in good nick,
and his daughters. And his daughter's recovering. Ben, all I'm saying is I haven't doubted from the beginning that it's a Russian actor. But, I mean, are you absolutely certain that this is something that, Putin himself authorised?
You can't be 100%, but people are now saying, oh, Corbyn was right because they can't chemically prove it. You don't get chemicals that have made in Russia written into every molecule of what they are. It doesn't matter. The chemicals don't need to have to trace back to Russia. They can be something they've got from another country or whatever, and a good criminal will make sure they cover their tracks. This is Corbyn, just same old, same old. He wants to go against every war. They made mistakes on Iraq. By the way, different topic, but Iraq had the weapons. Everybody over there knows they had the weapons. If you Google General Fadr, the ex-head of the Iraqi Air Force, he'll tell you exactly that Saddam had the weapons and shipped them off to Syria. The British media don't want to publish that report because they want to bring down Bush and Blair. That's where Corbyn stands on everything. Check everything out, get to the bottom of everything, really sceptical about everything.
Ben, I'm not
and done the right thing.
I am not a Corbyn fan at all, but I'm merely asking a question. In this case, perhaps he was right to say we should ask a few questions and try and get a bit more evidence before rushing to judgment. You may well be right, Ben, in everything you say, but boy, the government have taken a hell of a risk. And why, if they are so certain, can the Foreign Office not use a word stronger than assessment? Ben, I thank you, and both the last two callers feeling very strongly that it's a slam dunk. It must have been the Russians that did it. The evidence the circumstances point that way, even if the evidence at the moment doesn't quite get us. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. The chief executive, Gary Aitken, head of Porton Down, says they have not actually got proof that the nerve agent used in Salisbury came from Russia, which begs the question, was Jeremy Corbyn right to be cautious? And some very strong opinions on both sides of this debate. In other news, we talked a couple of weeks ago about UKIP and the difficulties that it's got. Gerard Batten is its interim leader, and as you know, it's been facing very serious financial problems. A message put out by Gerard Batten, MEP, today. I am very pleased to announce that my appeal to UKIP members to raise 100,000 sterling to save the party from insolvency has met with an incredibly generous response of almost 300k. In addition, The 175,000 legal bill has been paid by other means. UKIP is now safe, which won't please the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who wants to see it go out of business. US President Donald Trump says he wants to use the military to secure the border with Mexico until a wall is built. And this in response to a caravan of people, over 1,000 people who are currently travelling through Mexico, headed for the Californian border. And I've no doubt when I debate again tonight with the former Mexican president, Vicente Fox, there'll be a lot said about Donald Trump. But Trump now prepares to use the army to police the border with Mexico. Immigration, top of the debate here in the USA at the moment. Surprisingly in Britain, it's an argument that appears to have almost gone away. I get by text the security services know who the Russians were who carried out the Salisbury attack and how they got the nerve agent. The public, especially Corbyn, have no right to know. Well, Richard, I completely understand that. And if they've absolutely got this and they understand it all, then they can tell us without telling us, if you sort of see what I mean. Why did the Foreign Office use a word tonight that it is their assessment? Why not use something a bit stronger, which gives us a nod and a wink and says they actually know what's going on? I find the use of that word really very surprising. I also get on text, would Russia really want such a bad global press just before their big global sporting event? Unlikely. Would an enemy of Russia want that? Of course. Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? Our last caller last night, David, who was on from Storrington, suggested that maybe it isn't Russia. Maybe it isn't the United Kingdom. Maybe it's somebody, a Middle East actor or someone, who wants to see a new Cold War between the West and Russia. We don't know the truth of any of it. The likelihood is that it was a Russian actor. I've said that from the start. I still don't know or understand or believe. Was it Putin that authorised this? I don't know. Mike is calling from Newham. Mike, good evening.
Hey, Nigel. Hey.
Was Corbyn right to ask those questions, Mike, in your view?
Yeah, of course. It's a no-brainer. I think anyone who kind of disagrees with it is really an apologist for any type of war or foreign intervention. I think, of course, he was right to question it, like he did with Iraq and a lot of other foreign policy things. One quick thing is why Russia why it'd be weird for them to do it, because it would undermine that spy agreement they had. I mean, when spies go to each other's country and they make an agreement with other countries not to kill or get rid of it, it would undermine that whole thing.
Yes, he was just to remind people, Mike, that when Skripal came to the UK, he was swapped, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. It's on a spy swap. And I know people say, well, Iraq was 15 years ago and the intelligence services got it wrong, but a quite underreported story that happened, do you know the Manchester bombing? He was actually, the MI6, MI5 took terrorist controls off the bomber to go and fight in Gaddafi in Libya, right? And that's a recent example of the MI5 putting foreign policy interests before British people's interests. And it's not to say, obviously, they I
think in the case of Manchester, mistakes were made. Mike. Yes,
you can't take a terrorist control off a known guy and then let him back in the country without looking. You look at him, and even it's a massive.
Mike, do you know something? There are 400 people. Who've been let back into our country who were over fighting with ISIS in Syria. So I think there are some bigger questions to ask there. But in conclusion, Mike, do you think ultimately, is there any chance that Corbyn could be proved to be right about this?
I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Russian regime. It's quite authoritarian and right wing, but I would question whether they would do it. I think there's a lot of. I think it could be quite likely Russia refrained for it to do with foreign policy in the Middle East, especially regarding Syria. I think there's many reasons. I don't think we will find out at all, but I think the Labour MPs who signed the early day motion against Corbyn should really be ashamed of themselves because they've been proven wrong again on foreign policy, and maybe they should hopefully nip in the bud this time.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Mike, I thank you very much. Jenny says, just because Corbyn is the only one speaking for us, the people, doesn't mean we support him. No, Jenny, and you know, we've had a lot of people on this show in the last few weeks saying, look, I'm not a Corbyn supporter, but he did actually ask the right questions and got condemned for it. Tina says, a good leader communicates, and Mrs May has had no dialogue with Mr Putin. Why not? She also did not go along with the international protocol on chemical weapons. Why not? Too many questions. Chris is calling from Wimbledon. Chris, what do you think?
Hi, Nigel. Good to speak with you again. To be honest, I still think Corbyn hasn't redeemed himself from this. I mean, the reason why people were shouting disgrace and appeasement was because he was using the whole thing to score political points about cuts to the diplomatic service, Russian...
Yeah, and that was a huge mistake, wasn't it? Yeah.
And, you know, at a time when there was a chemical weapon attack on our own soil, but also why people were accusing him of appeasement, and one of the things I disagree with you about, actually, was he wanted, and I quote, robust dialogue with Russia. I mean, you know, what honestly is Russia going to say? I mean, you know, is Russia going to say, you know, oh, sorry, we lost control of it, or, yes, we carried out the attack? Come on, I mean, Putin's not going to admit that now, is he?
Well, Chris, you know, I could answer that by saying that Trump plans to have a summit with Putin, at which this will be raised.
Will it be discussed? I mean, you know, he didn't seem to discuss it with... Well, we don't know he discussed it with Putin.
Oh, Chris, come on. The Americans have kicked out 60 Russian diplomats. Of course it'll be discussed.
And no doubt it will, and probably with other European countries, but I still think that there's still a high possibility of Russia carrying out this attack. I mean, you know, Russia, you know, as far as we know, is the only country with such, you know, decades of expertise of manufacturing the chemical Novichok.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be made elsewhere. Look, Chris, you know, as I say, I do think it's a Russian source that did this. It's unlikely that it wasn't. I just seriously do ask questions about the timing of this and why Putin would do it right now. I don't know, but Chris, no, you know, your point of view is probably the majority point of view, but there are many others asking questions. Nigel, if the government had the proof, Corbyn should have been told because he's in the Privy Council, says Tony. Well, yeah, that depends, I suppose, Tony, how often the Privy Council meet, but I do take the point. There are things said at the Privy Council, the Queen's Privy Council, that are not for public dissemination, but would shape a view of an opposition leader, perhaps in Parliament. Corbyn is grandstanding over Russia, I get on Twitter. He was asking questions he should have asked in private. Well, you could counter that, I suppose, by saying that the job of the opposition leader is to provide some opposition. But as our previous caller said, he rather blew it by blaming cuts to our expenditure, and you can't blame cuts on everything. I've quickly got time for Patrick from Harlow, my last caller. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Nigel. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Right, who do you think did it?
I believe it was a Russian actor, Patrick. It may well have been the Russian government. If it was very crass timing. But I believe it's just as likely it was somebody that served in the intelligence services who felt utterly betrayed by the information Skripal gave to this country.
See, the Corbyn side doesn't really... I don't think it washes with most of the public, because I see it that... Once again, he's sat on the fence, and it's always easy to come down on the right side if you're sitting on a fence. Right? He hasn't put anything where it should be. And I look at Theresa May. These people are not stupid. You know, they'll have information about where that has come from. Of course, they can't. It doesn't come over to our country with a postage stamp on it. You know, so
well, they should give us more reassurance, Patrick. They should give us and use stronger words, the Foreign Office, than assessment. Patrick, I've got to go. We're over. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show.